For this video I will show you how you and yes, you can build your very own tank in Sandbox world. Keep in mind that you should not be too ambitious for your first build. You do not need to build the next best tank as your first, all you need is a functional one. You should start with the hull. Make a platform from blocks, preferably a 3-block wide one. After building the platform, add 2 engines. For this tutorial I will use the small ones, but you can use the large engines if you want to. After the 2 engines, add a tank chassis controller. Once you have done this, select the connector tool and connect the 2 engines to the tank chassis controller. I recommend that you rename the engines to make it clear which one is left and which right. Now modify the tank chassis controller. Put the left engine in the left track slot, and the right engine in the right track slot. Now modify the engines, turn the enable reverse option on. I would also recommend setting the engine power to maximum. Speed doesn't matter here, but remember that if your vehicle has too high of a speed, it will do a wheelie. After this, place a seat, connect it to the tank chassis controller, then modify the seat, and put the tank chassis controller in the both axis of movement slot. Once you've done this, put bearings on the side of your tank. For this video I am using medium-sized wheels, so we will make 1.5 block gaps between these bearings. Make sure that the bearings are facing the correct direction. Now connect the bearings to the engines. The bearings on the left of your tank will be connected to the left engine and vice versa. After connecting the bearings, get a wheel and put them on the bearings. Now you have successfully created a vehicle that drives like a tank. But a tank without a gun is just an oversized tractor. Start with a turret. First you need to place one bearing, then get a controller, connect the bearing to the controller. Then set the controller's maximum angle to 180 and minimum angle to -180. I would recommend setting the power to the maximum to avoid floppiness. Now modify the seat. Put the controller in the camera horizontal rotation slot. Put a block on top of the bearing to test if it works. For me it does. But your tank might have the bearing facing the wrong direction, leading to an inverted rotation like this. To fix it you can change the bearing direction, or enable the inversion switch when modifying the controller. Now let's start making an actual turret. All you really need now is a single bearing with a block on it. Make sure to put the bearing in this orientation. Once you place the block and the bearing, place another controller, mark it as vertical to not confuse it with the horizontal axis controller when modifying the seat. After placing this controller, connect it to the new turret bearing, then modify the controller. The degrees now represent the elevation and depression of the gun. Which direction is the elevation or which one is the depression depends on which direction the bearing is facing. For the tutorial I'm giving it 30 degrees elevation and depression. Connect the controller to the seat and put it in the camera vertically rotation slot. If the gun elevates when looking down or vice versa, just invert the bearing or the controller. Finally, put the gun on and connect it to the seat. I would recommend putting it in the destroy button slot. Now your tank drives and shoots. Here is a cool trick. Go to the vertical bearing, modify it, turn the disable offset option on. But, the tank looks awful without any armor. Keep in mind that this armor is completely decorational, as most tanks can one-shot you regardless of if you have armor or not. You may have noticed that the vertical traverse of the gun isn't great, as you have to fully look down for the gun to fully depress or vice versa. You can fix this with just two blocks, the signal rotator, and the filter. First, disconnect the vertical controller, and give it 90 degrees traverse in both directions. Then, get the signal rotator and the filter. Place a signal rotator, connect it to the seat, modify it to have an angle of 1, place a filter, connect the signal rotator to the filter in this order, then modify the filter's values, and connect it to the vertical controller, which you will connect to the vertical bearing. Now we need to be able to aim the gun of this tank. place a camera, modify it. The slider represents its field of view. For this tutorial let's make it 30. You also have to turn the sight option on. You can also turn on the rangefinder. Then connect the camera to the seat. We have now found an issue. You have to hold down the camera button for it to work. You can easily fix this. Disconnect the camera, place a switch, connect the switch to the seat, and the camera. You can name the switch whatever, but I recommend naming it camera, followed by a number representing its FOV. Would also recommend putting the switch into the buttons and sliders slot of the seat. Now your tank can drive, aim and shoot. Which means it's finished. Connecting the wheels together gives you working tracks.